702.
The Africa Report.
I asked the question a little earlier on, are some lives worth more than others? It's an age-old question because why is the world looking away from possibly the worst humanitarian crisis of our time? 12 million people displaced. When we say that word displaced, it's just another word, but these are women, these are children, these are the elderly, these are the disabled with nothing but the clothes on their back. They can never return to their homes. They wouldn't recognize them even if they did. They've been burnt to the ground. And they have nowhere to go. They don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. Is it in a forest? Is it under a bush? Is it in a cave? One meal a day for them would be a blessing. They are facing acute hunger, if not downright starvation. A UN report has described some of the fighting as having the hallmarks of a genocide. I'm talking about the ongoing war in Sudan. It erupted just 3 years ago in April 2025. Now in its fourth year, it really is the story of the wretched of the earth. Our EWN colleague, Jane Dutton, has done a deep dive into the story and joins us now to tell us a little more. Jane, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
So, as I understand it, the two warring factions or groups, if you will, started as allies.
Yep.
They were trying to oust the longtime ruler, Omar al-Bashir, who was there, 3 decades? For listeners who may not have been following this closely, can you explain how Sudan reached this point and who the main parties in the conflict are?
Okay, there are two belligerents really, but we need to go back just a little
Even
bit.
more.
Under Omar al-Bashir, a real dictator, he funded and supported the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed operated in Darfur in the early 2000s, and they were behind the genocide there. It's been called a genocide, proven to be a genocide, where they wiped out villages, people burnt, destroyed, raped.
I mean, they would come in the dead of night on horseback, right?
Correct.
And they would simply wipe out villages. They would burn them to the ground. And Darfur is in the western part of Sudan.
That's right. Non-Arab villages that they would deliberately target. So Omar al-Bashir was linked to this, and that's why he faced the International Criminal Court. And you might remember, day of shame in South Africa. He even came to South Africa in June of 2015, even though South Africa is a signatory to the International Criminal Court. Anyway,
so just for context, because I think this is important, the detail actually matters. The Janjaweed were essentially an Arab militia supported by Omar al-Bashir's government or state. And in Darfur, they were targeting Sudanese people of African descent.
That's right.
Who were not Arabs.
That is correct.
And that's what we stood by to support when we didn't arrest him.
That's right.
Just for clarity. Okay, please continue.
Yes, thank you for that. And in fact, it's still happening today. But so you have the Janjaweed, which morphed into the RSF, the Rapid Support Force, and you've got the Sudanese army. There was a popular uprising in 2019 to get rid of Omar al-Bashir. I mean, terrible leader. Obviously, the genocide, the country was crumbling. And these two forces came to a sort of uneasy agreement to work together to resolve the issues in the country. Because of several factors, the two main protagonists, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, is basically the de facto head of state, and the RSF's Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, they had different aspirations, and it was very hard to bring the RSF militia into the Sudanese army. And that's where it all fell apart. Nobody really knows who fired the first shot, and that was in 2023. So that is where we are today. The problem with what is happening there, Bongani, is that it's no longer just a civil war. It's a regional war. It's a massive country. Sudan is the third largest in Africa, and it borders 7 other countries. And because of this, what's happening between these two gentlemen, many other countries come into play. The UAE is known to be funding, it denies it obviously, the RSF. They send funding through Chad. They also send fighters through Chad, including Colombia militias, ex-soldiers, ex-Colombian soldiers.
From South America.
From South America.
That Colombia.
Which the UAE likes. They also they were also on the board of Doha when that escapade happened. And then with the Sudanese army, a new player, which is a big problem, is Ethiopia has just recently stepped in, also supporting the RSF. Eritrea supports the Sudanese army. Eritrea and Ethiopia are arch enemies.
Rivals, of course.
We've got Egypt supporting the Sudanese army, and Turkey, who used to support the Janjaweed, the RSF, is now supporting the Sudanese army. And it's all down to gold, oil, influence, and access to the Red Sea.
Because there's minerals there to be fought over, and as you say, control of the Red Sea. Where is the African Union in all of this?
Well, I mean, muted as usual. The African Union has stepped in, the EU has stepped in, the United Nations has stepped in. There have been many peace initiatives over the years. Nothing has landed. You know what? There's nothing to give up. Both sides, RSF and the Sudanese army, believe that they've got nothing to lose.
Is there a kind of fatigue when it comes to Sudan? I mean, you mentioned Darfur. I remember going back to the mid-2000s, 2006. I mean, 20 years ago, that was a story that was top of mind. You had Hollywood celebrities, George Clooney, for example, speaking out against what was happening there. Did the world just think this dragged on too much and they moved on to other crises?
Absolutely. I spoke to the head of the UN there, Denise Brown, and I said, what is it? Is it Africa? Is it fatigue? She said, maybe it is Africa. She said, people seem to associate Africa with this sort of thing that's happening. She said she doesn't understand why people don't care. She does not understand. So many NGOs are there, but how come nobody does anything to put a stop to this? I mean, 33 million people need aid. You see children as young as 10 and 11 years old standing at checkpoints holding assault rifles. There in Darfur, in particular, mass gang rape, people in refugee camps constantly being attacked. The displacement of people is relentless. A lot of those who've fled from Darfur over the years and recently, and from the Nuba Mountains, non-Arab Sudanese, have encamped around the capital Khartoum, and they are being attacked. They are having their homes demolished. It's relentless. It seems unstoppable, and maybe it's almost too big for people to wrap their heads around.
Overwhelming. And I said at the start of this conversation, we use words like displaced.
Yep.
Right? Millions displaced. What does displacement actually mean, especially when it comes to the Sudanese?
Well, for many, I mean, for example, running away from Darfur since the early 2000s, they've had to pack their bag, whatever they have, and they run. I mean, areas where there are the epicenters like El Fasher, Kordofan, there is constant gunfire, fighting, shooting, armed men going into these refugee camps, displacing people. People are moving with absolutely nothing. And then again, around the capital, I was talking to a journalist there, and she just said what they are seeing is apartheid. And government officials will go and just demolish homes. The other day, she said a friend of hers went off to the market, came back, her kids were inside a house that had been demolished. So these are people who are moving around with absolutely nothing. I spoke to Imad Iman. He was a man who was able to escape when the fighting first erupted, and he's now in the Netherlands. He said it was absolutely petrifying. They had cars taken away from them, cars torched, but he was lucky enough to have money coming in from elsewhere. So he was able, after 4 months, to leave the country. So, they're surviving on basics. Again, it's the Sudanese who've got people living, the diaspora, sending money in, who are able to support themselves, to live.
And of course, South Sudan, which is a country that was created from Sudan, is having its own problems because it's a mineral-rich, resource-rich country. You've done a deep dive into all of this, and that's why we're having this conversation. Tell us more about that, and where can people access your report?
Well, you can download it on the EWN app. You can also find it on YouTube. It's about 20 minutes deep dive, as you say, into all the issues at play, the politics, where the epicenters are, and what you can do to help.
And of course, you can find it on primemediaplus.com as well. Jane Dutton, EWN news anchor, and really expert on much of what she covers. Thank you very much for joining us for this week's Africa Report.
Thank you.
Current events, developing stories,
Tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.